Greetings and welcome to Outlaw Gamer Radio, the official podcast of OutlawGamers.com. This is the show where we live to play and play to live. I'm Brent Adams, joined by a man who is not Mr. Lauren Baumgarten.
Disappointed at that, too.
Because Mr. Lauren Baumgarten is currently moving from Brazil to the United States and doesn't have internet service. So instead, we are joined by a man who puts the fin in dolphin blood beer, Mr. Tony Grice. Ladies and gentlemen.
What is going on, man?
What's up, man? How you doing?
One hell, I thought you were going to, bust a blood vessel there, having to go so long there in the intro.
I'm a professional. I know what I'm doing.
I do appreciate the invite to get back on here with you.
Awesome, man. Well, I am Uber over you being here. That's actually not the correct usage of that word. I'm extremely excited about you being here, as I'm sure the Outlaws are happy to have you. Of course, you follow in Daniel's footsteps. He was on with us just recently.
That's what I heard. Talking about Retro,
Retro Game Mag, which is
I am also very excited for.
Kind of having a series of like mini EBC reunions going on here.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's get into the garage. We're going to talk about some news stories because, man, there's a lot of news stories, particularly if you happen to be following happenings and goings on coming out of the Game Developers Conference 2015. Run it down last week. We're going to hit some of the highlights here that I think would be of interest to people. We're going to start off with Unreal Engine 4 is now free, and there's YouTube message from Tim Sweeney talking about what Epic wanted to accomplish with Unreal and how this new business model is going to hopefully allow them to continue making inroads to developers at every level of their game. Ha ha ha. The current business model that you're going to have if you want to get Unreal, and if you want to get Unreal, all you got to do is go to the fucking website and download the thing. But anyway, the point is that they don't make money unless you make money. If your game generates more than $3,000 of revenue per quarter, then Epic takes a 5% cut.
Which I think sounds pretty
stream.
Damn reasonable.
I agree. I don't think that's too much.
Yeah.
I mean, in the grand scheme of percentages you could pay, I mean, it's not alimony levels, and I don't know a damn thing about alimony other than how to pronounce it. But the point is, it sounds. I mean, based on the Jim Belushi movies that I've watched in my life, it sounds like alimony costs a lot.
It sounds like it, and I think that it is. That's accurate.
Man, that dude's he's paying alimony.
And let's be honest, you don't get anything for alimony.
No, you don't. You don't
in this case, your
game engine.
Yeah, well, yeah, and we get these awesome, hopefully awesome games to come in our future from this because it's all we're talking Unreal Engine 4, which is cutting edge. It's the newest
pop, son.
Exactly. It's kind of interesting that during the announcement, or actually I think maybe it even happened like the day before or 2 days before, something like that. They dropped the free to play Unreal Tournament beta, I guess, or whatever they're calling it.
That's the new one.
The early version of it.
Right.
And I was really looking forward to it because I got to be honest, Unreal Tournament, especially back in the day.
We played some Unreal Tournament in our days.
One of my favorite. It was really one of the only online shooters that I really enjoyed early on. Yeah. Like it and Quake 3 Arena, those two games I loved. And it took kind of till, honestly, probably like the Modern Warfare days before I really got back into online shooters again. Mm-hmm. But
against your will, I understand.
I was so looking forward to it because it was kind of my first sort of look at Unreal Engine 4 type of gameplay graphics and everything. Yeah. And unfortunately, I don't know if it's just the load that they had on them because of the announcement at GDC and all that sort of stuff. I could not seem to get logged on. I was able to create an account and get it downloaded and all that stuff, but had an awful time trying to get into an actual game. So, but man, I'm really, really looking forward to it. I think it's cool tech, and the thought that you or I, if we knew a goddamn thing about programming.
Well, if we knew C++, we'd be in good shape.
Step one,
learn C++.
Step one, get free Unreal Engine software. Step two, learn how to program. Step three, profit.
But we're ahead of the underpants gnomes, and that's all that counts.
We are.
All right, here's a question for you. Would Red Heat have been a better film if instead of a police officer, Jim Belushi had played a game developer struggling to get an arcade classic into the American arcades, and the movie had actually ended not with Arnold Schwarzenegger playing chicken with a Russian gangster, but rather Arnold Schwarzenegger taking Jim Belushi's video game concept back behind the Iron Curtain, where it was released as Tetris, and it's what solves the Cold War.
It's an interesting,
and then they just do cocaine, cuz
it's an interesting experiment in thinking about this, but it starts from a false.
I'm not sure if I'm thinking about it all that much, but keep going.
It starts from a false standpoint, though, of can Red Heat be better? I mean,
well said, my friend.
I don't know. Let's be honest. I think perfection is the only word that I sort.
If you guys are interested in hearing, and we won't go on too much about movies in this podcast, but if you guys are interested in hearing about movies, you can catch Tony and I over at drivehomebreakdown.com, and where we do a movie podcast. As of recently,
that hasn't been a good place to catch up on us talking about movies.
We haven't done an episode in a few months, but we're back now. We just recently got back to it. But anyway, for those of you who don't follow, I'm just going to, since it's my show and everything, I'm just going to insert a little PSA here for the Drive Home Breakdown podcast. Which
Lauren doesn't even have the internet to listen to this one at this point. So
even if Lauren had the internet, do you think he'd listen to our show? Come on. Be honest with yourself. But anyway, drivehomebreakdown.com if you're interested in more tomfoolery on the movie front. Moving on, following in the I was going to say following in the footsteps, but that might not be fair to Valve. But speaking of
although I do think that there is a little bit of following in the footsteps going on here.
It definitely seems like some people that make game engines are kind of moving in a similar direction. Valve has announced that Source 2, the follow-up to the Valve Source engine that's been powering Valve games since what? Counter-Strike? Was Counter-Strike the first thing they did? Or maybe Half-Life?
I believe so, yeah. Counter-Strike Source, yeah.
Anyway,
Half-Life 2, yeah, I think.
Source has been Valve's engine, since time immemorial. And they are releasing Source 2. It's going to be coming out very soon. And it's going to be free to content developers. Now, that is a direct quote from the announcement, and people were speculating about, well, what does that actually mean? Does it mean that you have to qualify as a content developer? Do you have to be licensed by the state in which you reside? Is there some sort of regulatory commission that's going to be involved in determining who is and who ain't content developers? No, not the case. Valve has since clarified, and we now know that free to content developers means that Source 2 is free with no royalties, not like those fucking Unreal guys we were talking about a minute ago. No fucking royalties. It's free to fucking use. Do whatever you like. The only caveat is that if you release a game, it must be available through a non-exclusive term with Steam. So you just got to release your game on Steam. You can release it anywhere else, but it's got to be on Steam if you use Source 2. That's the only caveat.
Which is kind of, I mean, let's be honest. That that's like saying the product you make has to be offered in Walmart's or something.
Yeah,
like the single largest, exactly, the single largest and most used and marketplace out there for PC gaming is where you have to release your game.
Your band can record an album using this. Like we just created this software that replaces your flaky, unreliable drummer and helps your singer get over lead singer's disease. And you can use the software to record the album of your dreams. The only caveat is you have to let us sell it in Walmart. You're like, oh, twist my arm and break it, zombie Sam Walton.
I do think there are some people that would probably fight that for whatever reason. They some people hate certain things. I do think Steam has that sort of savings. They're sort of Teflon. Like I can't think of anybody that does not like and or love Steam. From when I say that it seems like most developers, except for like, I guess there was that one indie developer that wanted Gabe Newell to die. But, you know, most other developers, I think, in general, like Steam because it's such a huge market and brings so many people to their products. And I know users love it. I mean, it's probably the most beloved platform in terms of, I mean, it's just
more active.
It just
users
works so
than Xbox
well.
Live, I'm told.
Yeah. I mean, it's the numbers. The numbers seem pretty wild behind it, so it's kind of hard to argue with. But anyway, I think this is a great thing. I do think it's almost. I don't think this is in direct reaction by any means to like the announcement of the Unreal Engine 4 being made free, but I do sort of feel like it's. I don't know. It's almost a little bit of a missed opportunity for them to not have maybe made it maybe a more clear statement the first time off. Right. You know, like with Unreal, it was they were very straightforward. Like, here it is, it's free. Here's our deal. You know, here's the deal with it, like what it will entail and require and whatnot. There you go. And it just sort of seems like they almost, I don't know. They sort of.
Do you think maybe that's
didn't describe this really well at first, and people were kind of like, "So I don't really know what. So what can we do with it?"
They had to kind of come back and follow up. Do you think that's because Epic is just maybe a more kind of media savvy company than Valve? I mean, you know, I think Valve does really, really great. Valve has really great content, really great services, but
they are not the greatest at. I think you are right. They're not the greatest in selling themselves. If I'm honest, I've actually always felt that. I felt that they're. From everything from like the look of their interface of their platform to you know just the way they do things, it's sort of so subtle.
They're engineers over at Valve.
That's a great way of putting it. It just, you know, the stuff works. It's, you know, it works great. People love it, but they probably would do themselves a few favors and maybe improving that sector of their business. But hell, who knows? Maybe that's what keeps them the way they are now. Maybe that's a good thing.
I think that Valve is definitely looking to increase the success of their business, and whether or not they're going to do it by branching out into hardware remains to be seen. But Valve is branching out into motherfucking hardware, everybody, and they're doing it in a big way. Of course, a lot of this stuff we've known about in
for quite a while,
levels,
actually.
For a year or more. But we are finally getting some hardcore details and timelines on Valve's foray into hardware, and here's what we got for you right now. One of the surprise announcements that we haven't known about for more than a year, although something that I have talked about wanting. If you ever listen to a little show called Epic Battle Cry, I talked about wanting this for a long time, and I thought maybe Steam machines would be a way to get it, but it turns out I don't have to have a motherfucking Steam machine in order to get my games from my Steam equipped PC downstairs to any television in the house. All I need is a drumroll Steam Link, which is a $50 box that connects either via Wi-Fi or Ethernet to the Steam gaming PC somewhere in your house, and it will stream your video games over your Wi-Fi or hardline connection to a TV, which you can use in conjunction with a Steam controller, and play your video games wherever you want to in your house. It's going to run $50. It's going to be out in November. You're also going to be able to get it at a package deal with the Steam controller, which is also $50. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. But, I mean, here we are. I mean, we got the PlayStation. You got the PlayStation, what do they call it? The PlayStation TV? What's the...
Yeah. You're talking about the Vita, like the PlayStation TV,
exactly.
The Vita TV thing, yeah.
Yes, okay. So you got that. We've seen a number of these kinds of devices before. Obviously, you've got
the announcement of Windows 10 and the way that you'll be able to like stream things to your Xbox through them. So everybody's kind of, or a lot of people are trying to get that sort of like, rather than have to buy a whole nother device if I've already got a nice, big hunkin', PC, computer or some other device that plays games
just
over here.
The signal somewhere else in the house.
Yeah. And the technology at this point, I've very adamantly sort of poo-pooed like the on live and things like that early on, mainly just because I really thought the timeline I felt like they were putting out wasn't realistic. Yeah. But we're now years down the line of where, sending content over a local network is near flawless, I think, at this point. Even sending over the internet, I think is working pretty darn well for the companies that are still trying that, because really,
NVIDIA sure hopes so.
Yeah.
With the whole Shield console and the grid service they're talking about.
And you got to think. I mean, this is $50. I think it's a great price point.
Yeah.
And if
it works as advertised,
yeah,
they're going to do fine.
Well, and they talk about like it's they're really aiming at that really clean. Like you just plug it in and log into your account, and it'll log into your wireless account, and then it just looks and says, "Hey, you've got a computer with Steam running on it that's logged in right now. Is that the one you want to use? Yes.
What game you want to play?
Yeah. So pretty cool. I am excited. I'll be brutally honest with you. I'm not nearly the PC gamer that you are. So I don't know if it's like a day one
gamer that I am these days.
Well, so it's one of those things. Like I think it's a great idea, and I think it's great technology. I don't know that I'll be buying it day one, but for $50, I could definitely see it being just a sort of. To be brutally honest, I can see the next big game I buy on the PC. I could see that as being something I pick up alongside it. Yeah. Like, you know what? Here's as good a time as any. I got some new game over here. Let's just go ahead and try this out, so I can play it downstairs on the bigger screen and all that sort of stuff. Right.
Well, for me, my gaming PC is downstairs in my office, but most days I'm upstairs. I'm upstairs in the living room with the family, and the few moments that I usually have time to game, which is usually when Zelie is napping, usually when she's laying down or something like that. That's typically when I've got a few moments to myself to try and get some gaming done. And frankly, it's rare. It's rare that I actually come downstairs and do anything. Because number one, I come down to the office and invariably I'll start working. Because I'm just like, oh, well, I could be doing this and this and this. I'll talk myself out of gaming because I've just got so much going on. But sure. So I stay upstairs because that's the thing. Like all the PlayStation and stuff, like that's all up in the living room. So without me having to come downstairs, like I don't have that temptation to just be a workaholic. But number two, it also keeps me close to the action where, if my wife's doing something and she needs help, say with the baby, then it's not like I'm running off downstairs and I can't hear you because I'm playing Alien Isolation with the headphones on or whatever. I think it would actually be a really good fit for me.
Well, I even think of this. This to me is very akin to what I see as something like the Chromecast. Yeah. The Chromecast, to be brutally honest with you, when it first came out, I bought one because it had 3 free months of Netflix, mm-hmm. and so I was like, okay, so this is essentially $10. Yeah. Like if you kind of take because I was already paying for something that I was already paying for, getting that credit. This is basically free. And what it ended up being was a decent device. I'm not like a huge Chromecast fan because I still think there are, in general, better ways of doing it natively on a different device.
Yeah,
but
Roku.
Yes, I mean it's called about 1 million different devices. Let's be honest. But the thing I will say though is that became a neat little thing to have in my bedroom, like to have on the TV. At the end of the bed.
Okay,
And
I'm glad that you specified it was on the TV in the bedroom because for a second there, that sounded weird.
The dongle's not long enough to do anything else. Let's be honest.
How big is your dongle, Tony?
But in all honesty, it was one of those things where it worked perfect to hook up to a bedroom TV to give a little more, just a few more apps, a few more things that I can send to it. This to me feels like that sort of device. Like this is a good thing to put like in, say, another room where it's maybe even not the like key room that you're going to be gaming in all the time. Maybe it's a secondary room or something else. I could see this as being a really good fit for it. I'm interested. We're going to talk about some other things that are coming. With Valve. I wonder if they're trying a lot of things. I wonder if all of these things are going to work out, or if even just maybe one of them really becomes a breakout product for them. It'll be interesting. I'm a little apprehensive that all of the things, the Steam Link, the Steam Machine, and even their controller, I'm a little apprehensive of whether all three of those are going to be big, huge things for them, or whether one or two of them are going to be big and just used with other devices down the road. So
it's a fair question.
Looks cool though, and I'm definitely interested to try it out.
Let's talk about a couple of the other things real fast. I know it's actually third in the dock, but let's go ahead and talk about the controller right now since you just mentioned it.
Whoa, wait a minute. I was prepared to talk about that third.
Hi, Jack Bauer. I guess I came to meet you off the reservation. The Steam controller's been announced. What we presume is the finalized version.
I think they've even said it's the finalized version, haven't they?
That doesn't mean anything to me. Like, oh, we promise this is the last one. Yeah, this is it.
I saw it on the internet,
whatever.
The internet told me that was accurate.
If you saw the original version, you know that they were going for something pretty radical, and I would say that it still qualifies as being a different kind of controller. I mean, it definitely has qualities that are pretty unique, but it seems to me that they have drawn it back in a little bit more towards a traditional controller design. It now has one analog stick on the face. It also has 4 face buttons in the diamond configuration that you're familiar with, no doubt. The 2 prominent track pads that were always, I think, probably its most defining feature are still a part of it, and the haptic feedback that Valve always touted as being central to that device are also still a part of the design. I think the main thing that they've lost at this point was what was originally going to be that touch area, the
sort of like PS4 controller style touch area.
Was it actually going to be a screen originally? I'm trying to remember back now.
Oh,
was that originally going to be like a touch screen? I can't remember. Anyway,
maybe it was. I didn't think so. I thought it was actually just going to be
like a touch sensitive area that would take input.
It maybe you might be right though. It may have.
I can't remember the drugs, Tony. The drugs. Anyway, but that's gone now. There is there's a couple of buttons there in the middle. Kind of like where you'd expect to have like your PlayStation button or your Xbox button.
Yeah, start, select. Almost
like those kinds of those kinds of things that will just end up basically being utilized for menus or that kind of stuff. But it's got actually 6. It's got 6 buttons on the backside. You've got your 2 triggers and you've got 2 bumpers. But then there's also 2 buttons. I think they're kind of like inset, like like where you'd have your hands wrapped around the horns. You could kind of get to them with the fingertips, so kind of like on the inside of the bottom. So you've got 6 buttons on the rear. You've got a total of 7 buttons on the face, and then obviously you've got the analog, and then the 2 trackpads, which are also button-like inputs. They talk about the triggers. The triggers are
these actually sound pretty cool. I mean, it sounds like a simple thing, but kind of neat.
Yeah, but they're kind of like dual action. So you've got like an analog pull to the trigger, but then at the end of it, there's also a click. And so they can kind of do digital or analog input with those. One of the things I read, somebody was speculating that it's like, okay, so like as an example, imagine that the fire button and the down the sights button is the same. You like slow pull the trigger to get down the sights, and then click at the end to actually fire.
That is I like that. I like it in theory.
I was going to say I'm impressed. I'm impressed with the concept. In execution, we'll see. But I think the real question with this controller is how is it going to work for PC games, which is what it's designed to do. What it's designed to do. I mean, we all know controllers work fine for video games on console, but we also know that if you're a member of the PC master race, you're standing up on top of your tower case and you're laughing as you wield mouse and keyboard from up there. How is this going to work as far as that goes? There's a hands-on that Polygon's got. A few other people are talking about it. They got some hands-on time at GDC, and I don't know. It seems to me that jury's still out. People are still kind of talking about, okay, this part works kind of good, or they talk about like the haptic feedback on those trackpads, like. They're talking. You can scroll across it, and it really feels like a trackball. It really feels.
It has some like weight to it. It doesn't just feel like loosey.
And it's all just haptic feedback. It's all just the controller tricking you into feeling as if there's a track ball under your thumb.
Yeah.
When instead it's just this feedback pad. So it seems like the technology. It seems like the technology is capable of some impressive things, but the question is just how well is it going to work in execution as a controller with games that were meant for mouse and keyboard? Like, how's the translation going to work out?
Well, and it always to me was a little interesting because it does sort of seem like that's one of the big feathers in a lot of PC gamers' cap is the mouse and keyboard option, which I'll be honest, I do prefer for a lot of things. But it's the types of games that you would be playing on a Steam machine. A lot in a lot of cases are going to be your console games. The types of games that you would play on a console with a controller as well. So the only ones that I feel like we have to be sold on is the sort of PC feel of things. And it does sound, and from every review that I've heard of people that have actually had hands on, say that like this does it as well as anything they've tried before. It probably better than anything they've tried before. But it also doesn't seem like anybody's just like, this is it. Like, bam, they nailed it. And I do wonder if they kind of don't. I don't know. To me, there's only one thing that I see about this controller where I do think that if I were to say like they've made a mistake, which I'm not saying it's like a mistake, but it's like the one thing I think that they.
Hold on a second, I'm tweeting. Tony Grice says Valve makes mistake.
Is and as we all know, my net worth is more than Gabe Wells, so obviously I'm the person to listen to on this.
Listen to your friend.
But in all seriousness, to me, if they just had the second analog stick. Mm-hmm. Then to me, it seems like you would have everything.
Right.
You'd have that option to use this new control mechanism, this new interface that we have, but you'd still have every bit of the controls that you had before. And I know people are going to say, well, but you can still do the same thing over there. Well, it's obviously going to be different. And I mean, there are people that buy. That just live and die by certain controls. I mean, that is our. That is our way of getting into the games. Yeah. That's how we feel what we're doing in the games. It's such a critical part of the game, probably the most critical. If controls are off in a game, it doesn't matter how good it looks, how great the storyline is, how enveloping the audio is, all that sort of stuff. If you get irritated with the controls, or if they don't work right, that takes you so far out of it that sometimes you just can't come back. Yeah. And so to me, that sort of seems like something that it just would have made sense. Like it just to me seems a little bit like a no-brainer. But having said that, I think it looks very promising. It looks. I am interested to try one.
Me too.
Although it sounds as though. Are we going to be able to buy these separately? Like if you don't have a Steam box, are you going to be able to get this?
Yeah, they're available individually. You can pick them up.
Okay, for $50, is that right?
Yeah, they're $50. They're out in November. Along with the Steam link, I'm going to double check the date on the Steam link because I was thinking it's November, but I could be wrong about that, and I meant to mention it anyway. But the thing with the controller for me is basically what you're saying. Like it really just comes down to how well it works. But one thing I will say is that I think one of the good things about the way that Valve kind of approaches things with Steam is that it's going to benefit from the community. You're going to be able. You can remap buttons per game to your heart's content. You can tweak the sensitivity of the haptic pads and all that stuff. And I think that it's one of those things that the community is going to be working on. This people are going to be able to link to configurations and things like that. So, as an example, if the group of people playing Counter-Strike, just as an example. Mm-hmm. If they find a real sweet spot as far as what works with the controller in the game, provide us like, okay, so here's what you have to kind of do with your hands. Here's what you need to be doing with the controller, but you use these settings and you kind of approach the controller in this way, and it works great for this game. And I think that as people refine that, as more and more people use it, it'll be one of those things that it'll get distilled down where every game has like kind of an ideal button mapping system or an ideal setup, as far as like, the sensitivity and the tweaks and all that stuff. I think that it'll get better as the community uses it. And so provided that, there's a solid foundation there that actually is capable of doing something worthwhile, I think that we'll get to it through that mechanism. And by the way, the Steam Link is coming out in November also.
Okay. I definitely think you're right. I mean, I think that they will make that as good as it can be. I don't have any doubt in that. I do think, though, that it's sort of similar as to saying that, like, when you're using, say, like a touchscreen device, or you're using mouse and keyboard, using anything, you have tons of control on a PC. That's the greatest thing, is you have tons of control over what how your input works on a PC. That's one of its greatest strengths. But that doesn't always mean that you like that interface. And so that's my thing with this, is to me, if I pick it up and it does just feel perfect, right, then that's great, and I have no worry. But if it kind of picks up, I'm like, I can see where they're going with this, but I don't know. It's not immediately, no matter how much customization of that. Sure. I don't know. I feel like it still just has to. It has to just work. And
if you pick it up and it dislocates your thumb,
then I feel like that's not working.
Yeah, I mean, there's no amount of shareable configurations that are going to fix your dislocated thumb.
The other thing, though, the one thing I will say, the largest caveat to all this is, from what I understand, you can still use like a Xbox One controller, this doesn't limit your other options. So I mean, that this is just another option. If this were like the only controller that worked with a Steam box or something like that, then I would. I think that would be a big mistake. But the good thing is you still have tons and tons of options as to how you can control things, and this is just another one that I will say looks pretty cool. It's definitely different. I will say at least they are trying something quite a bit different from everybody else.
Innovate, which I'm down for.
Absolutely.
Speaking of,
don't say innovation, because it will not apply to what you're about to.
No,
talk
I was going to say, speaking of Steam boxes, one of the things that we did talk about back on that show we used to do, Epic Battle Cry, we talked a lot about Steam machines, and it was always one of those things that, I think that I was always more excited about it than you were, and I think you were always a little bit more skeptical about the idea and everything. And as time,
I just don't know that I necessarily understood its market. That's the biggest thing.
And I'm glad you said that, because that is exactly the point that I want to address. I think that I always thought that I.
Well,
understood.
You, sir, are an idiot. No, I'm just kidding.
I think I always thought I understood what the market was, but I was wrong. I do think I understand what the market now, though, is for the Steam machines. And along with everything else, the first batch is going to be coming out in November. And if you go over to the Steam store page and look under hardware, they've got a page for the Steam machines, and there's a list of manufacturers. There's prices, and you can go and you can look at specific configurations, see what the specs are, and all that kind of thing. If you want to get a sense of the range that we're looking at here, I think the lowest one is from iBuyPower. It's $460, so not too much more than what you'd get if you were paying for a PlayStation 4. And at the top end, you've got Falcon Northwest and Origin PC that they've got boxes that are going to run north of $5,000. So a pretty big spread there.
Yeah.
Now, that being the case, here is the revelation that I had about what the Steam machines are and who the market is. I, for a long time, thought that the Steam machines were about Valve trying to get a piece of the console market. I think that if something like that were to happen, it would almost sort of be a side effect of what the Steam machines, I think, actually are going to be. What the Steam machines are actually going to be is they are going to be PCs for people like Brent Adams, who are out of the PC hardware game and have been out for many, many years. When I went to the gaming PC I have right now, when I decided to put together the SWTOR box, as I famously called it, when I decided to put that together, I had no fucking clue what I was doing. I had not built a PC in like 7-8 years. I had no idea where I needed to be at in terms of like the chipset I was looking at, what the great mid-level Intel processors, whatever I should be doing, like RAM stuff. I really had to kind of I had to re-educate myself. I had to kind of get back into that mindset.
Which, because you knew that stuff. You're the one that taught me when you know back in the day. But you'd made that move to Apple, which I have kind of come later to that myself, where you just you bought the machine and it just sort of worked. It did the thing that you got it for.
I just got a box that I plugged in and turned on and then did stuff with it. Yeah. Which is basically my Mac,
just so
basically
passive.
my console. But you got to work at gaming on a PC. It takes a little bit.
But the payoff can be awesome. There's definite payoffs for it.
So anyway, that I think is what the Steam machines are. And I see people talking about this on the website. I see people posting, blogs, posting in the forums saying, "Okay, I'm thinking about putting together a gaming PC. What do I need to look at? What do I need to do?" This is a big question mark because everybody wants to get the most bang for the buck. They want to get as much performance as possible for the least amount of money. They need something reliable, and there's a lot of ins and outs. It's not just, processor and chipset and memory. You got to be thinking about the power supply. You got to think about cooling, all this stuff. Doing a gaming PC takes a little bit of forethought, and some people relish that. Some people really, really enjoy that process of tinkering and putting stuff together. I really loved it 10 years ago. Now, I don't have time. Now, I just want to buy something, plug it in, and have it work. That's why I like consoles. And that is what Steam machines are. Steam machines are I think it's going to become a shortcut for people that want to be PC gamers, not console gamers, but people who want to be PC gamers. It's going to be a way for them to go and find, it's like, you know what, I've got about $800-900 to spend on a gaming PC. I could build it myself, or I could take some of the guesswork out and I could go and read reviews on one of these Steam machines. Oh, I'll get that one. Now, the caveat to that is the OS. Steam OS, Linux, not Windows. That's a huge deal right now, maybe less so in time, but for right now, there's still a great divide there. But I think that is what the Steam machines are going to be.
I don't even think that you're wrong about that. I wonder if that is.
Will it work?
I don't know. I'm still sort of in that. I never really thought that it was their way of sort of competing with the console market per se.
I remember.
I did think it was their sort of way of making kind of what you're describing, like an easy way to get into the PC market. I guess the thing that I always sort of had a problem with is, to me, what the benefits are of being sort of in the PC market, getting a game, all sort of seem to be lost on the Steam machine. Like, it's kind of that whole thing of you can't, the upgradability is limited. I mean, it's not, I don't want to say it's not there. So you still can kind of do that, but then it's kind of like, okay, well, for all the things that I kind of want to do with a PC, what is it that a Steam machine offers me that I can't do on a PC, and vice versa, I guess. Realistically, I can't just buy one and have it work. Well, you can buy PC, gaming PCs and have them just work. And for the prices that they're talking about, not really for any cheaper. I mean, you can buy gaming, PCs in the $600-700 range. Now, I mean, granted, they have one at $449 or $469, whatever it is. So a little bit cheaper, but to me, that still seems like a market where if the cost is your biggest sort of focus, I feel like a lot of people are still going to go to a console, which is going to be cheaper. And who knows, maybe even cheaper than they are now, in another 9 months or whatever. So I don't know. It still seems to me to be a bit of a weird market. I'm not saying that I don't, that I think they're just stupid and this ridiculous. I do just sort of think, I don't know that they're going to be a huge, I guess I don't know what size market I think they're going to get out of it. I don't think that it's going to be a huge segment of the market, especially considering, that right now, running the Steam OS, you're limited to quite. I mean, there's a big difference in what is available on Steam OS versus Windows in terms of your gaming options.
Definitely
on it's akin to, like,
theory,
I mean, it's better than the Mac, I guess, isn't it?
That you couldn't install Windows on a Steam machine.
But then you're again buying a license. Of course, I guess 10 is. Well, and I was just going to say, I think actually they're saying 10 is going to be free, so maybe that is a moot point. But
and actually, I will say right now that is one of the smartest things Microsoft has done in a long, long time.
I
That is
agree.
a really,
Although
really good move on their part.
exactly, although it's one of those like they've been they've just not done it for long enough that everybody else is doing it. I mean, Mac is giving away their OS for free for a while, and it just
But 10 looks like 10 looks like a decent operating system. I mean, if they were giving away
Eight.
Windows 8 for free, who'd give a shit? But 10 looks like it's actually a decent OS.
Wouldn't line my trash can with Windows 8. But yeah, I don't know. I'll be very interested to see how this is received once it gets into the marketplace, especially because I do sort of feel like there's a fragmentation of expectations. Like, when you say a Steam machine, it's not like, and I don't even mean just the console, versus PC side of things, but it's not just all right, I'm going to buy the PS4. Maybe there's a difference in, okay, I'm going to buy the terabyte PS4 versus the 500 megabyte PS4 down the road. Right. That's not even a thing you talk about now. But like down the road, there might be that sort of like, which PS4 do I buy? But it's still a PS4. It plays all the same games and all in the exact same quality, yada, yada, yada.
Just like maybe storage options.
Exactly. When we're talking about Steam machines, I mean, the kind of experience that you're going to get, gameplay wise is going to be pretty drastic from this to this.
You're going to see a big difference between the $460 Steam machine and the $5,000
let's fucking hope
Steam
so. If you're not, then they're really doing something wrong.
If you're not, then you're doing it wrong.
But we'll talk about another story here in a minute, talking about Sony and what they're looking at in the future. But it is one of those things. Like I think that there is kind of like this weird sort of thing that I don't know. I'll be very interested to see how this rolls out when in November when they push all this stuff through, finally through. And finally, can we just all agree they need to fucking change? They need to come up with a better name, because every time they talk about fucking Steam Machine, I think of those fucking Roto-Rooters, rug doctors that you rented at the fucking Kroger when you had a stain on your carpet or something.
It needs to be a verb. Like it needs to it's not that I'm playing games. It's like I'm doing this. Like I'm
like a steamer.
That's terrible.
No, that doesn't sound.
What if it was like snare? Like, hey,
snare.
New snare.
What was like Spanish for the word for life or something.
Yeah, because we all know how well that's worked out. All right, everybody, welcome back to the clubhouse. Pull up a chair, kick up your feet. We're gonna talk a little bit more about VR this week. Of course, last week we were talking about the news that Valve and HTC are getting into the VR game with the Vive. There were some hands-on reports coming out of GDC talking about that, but there's an article floating around that makes an interesting case for Project Morpheus, and we're going to talk about that in just a couple of minutes. Before we get there, though, I'm going to hand things over to Tony Grice to go over the poll results from last week's topic where we were discussing the ever-controversial Peter Molyneux.
So our question last week was, do you think that Peter Molyneux is a pathological liar? And of course the answer is yes.
Well,
we had three options here. We had our first was no, he's a habitual overhype artist, but I don't think that he's actually lied. That got us 29% of the votes.
Technically that makes it the third choice, but keep going.
I'm sorry. I'm reading in the third place here. Our second highest with 32% was yes. I don't think it's malicious, but he seems incapable of being honest, much like a lot of politicians.
Yes.
And our number one answer with 38%.
Although it is malicious with them, so.
Oh, that is very true.
Difference.
With 38%, our top answer that you guys felt was, I don't think his problem is with honesty, but rather with accountability. And I think that actually that's probably exactly where I sit as well. I don't really give a shit what he says he's going to do in essence. It's just whether he delivers on what he's going to do. Yeah. Like I would much rather him come out and say, I'm going to do this game, and that doesn't sound maybe game changing, but he can deliver on it, rather than kind of overpromise and never be able to make good on it.
Right.
How do you feel about it? Were you pretty much in that same boat?
The thing with I think I've way overthought this, as I tend to do.
But I made just an offhand comment towards the end of the segment on last week's show that I got done reading the interview on Rock Paper Shotgun with Molyneux, from which was very odd. It was a serious interview, and from whence this whole pathological liar question came. But I read the entire interview, and I got to the end of it, and I went and Googled the word sociopath and started reading up on how you can tell if someone's a sociopath, and it was really interesting, some of the parallels. There were things like sociopaths are never wrong ever, even if you present them with irrefutable proof that they're wrong about something, they will either attack you or they'll pass blame off to somebody else. And I'm like, that's kind of interesting. And then I think one of the other ones was sociopaths believe that things are true simply because they say them. That they shape reality merely by their words. And I'm somebody saying this video game will be the most revolutionary advancement in X because I say so. I was drawing all these parallels and stuff. And Lauren kind of talked me down. He's like, yeah, but I mean, that behavior is also consistent, with this and this. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the guy, is incapable of feeling empathy or whatever. Maybe you're right. But the thing is that another thing the article said is that this is why a lot of politicians tend to be sociopaths, because they also have kind of a win at all costs attitude. They're really dogged and determined. I'm I don't know. I can't decide. But anyway, I think Peter Molyneux might have a problem in the same way that the guy doing the interview said, listen, I'm asking you, do you think that you have a compulsive problem with the truth? And I have to say that I would maybe feel a little bit better about his answers if I didn't feel like Molyneux was really making excuses, passing the buck. Say, that wasn't my job. It was somebody else's job. Oh, nobody's working harder than I am. Woe is me. And then that whole business where he's like, I'm just going to stop being a game developer, or I'm going to stop doing press. You're not going to have Peter Molyneux. When he
Phil fished it at that point.
Yeah. I have to say that reading some of that stuff, I was just kind of man, I don't know. I don't think that you're not taking responsibility for the mistakes that you have made. And so anyway, I guess the long and short of it is that I do think that he has a problem with accountability and maybe a problem with honesty to go along with it.
I think, I will say, Habit, because we actually talked about this on a side note, the other day prior. And I will say, if you are in any interview, even sort of going into it knowing that it's probably going to be a tough interview because of all the things that have happened, in the previous days or whatever, the way that it was put to him, it would be hard not to feel defensive. I think to some degree, and I do kind of give him a mild amount of slack because of that, but in reality, I do think that he really did not come around to the point of sort of, okay, but here is what we're going to do to fix it. It basically just came down to, like you said, I mean, he kind of at one point is just like, you know what, I'll just won't make games anymore. How about that? I mean, it's very, very, very not what he should have said at that point. I mean, it does not instill confidence. I got to be honest. I don't see how this guy ever does a Kickstarter again. I'm not saying that he doesn't do games again,
frankly, but how did he do the Kickstarter the first time? I mean, that's probably famous. A good point. It was a punchline. Peter Molyneux got up on stage and claimed that Lionhead Studios had invented anti-gravity. Ha ha ha. Right? I mean, it was a joke. Everybody knew that Peter Molyneux was an overhype artist. And this guy does a Kickstarter, and I'm sorry, but for people to feel righteous indignation over Peter Molyneux overpromising something, I'm like, look, you guys knew who you were getting into bed with when you fucking pledged this money. You knew what was going to happen.
I will agree, although I think it's his first Kickstarter doing that. You know what I mean? It's I almost feel like maybe the audience is not the exact same audience that watched every E3 prior to that necessarily, or every press conference that he did prior to that necessarily.
Presumably they're fans of his.
Well, if they were, yeah,
And
I don't know.
I mean, and if that's the case,
let's be honest. There's no explaining this game having been put together. There's just not.
But anyway, we won't rehash it again too much. But I teased this article, and we're going to talk about this now. Obviously, VR is an ever present, kind of fixture on the horizon that is steadily getting closer and closer as we get nearer to a consumer release of VR hardware. Obviously, there's the field has gone from Oculus Rift to now I think 3 really viable VR options in terms of gaming. There's the Samsung Gear VR that obviously works in conjunction with their Android phones. I don't think that is as much of a gaming peripheral as it is designed to offer a lot of different kinds of VR content, games being a part of it. But I think the big 3 that we're really looking at right now for gaming are Oculus, Steam VR with the HTC Vive, and then obviously Project Morpheus, Sony's VR solution for the PlayStation 4. There was a really interesting article that many of you sent my way in the last week or so. Got a lot of attention. This was on Polygon. The title of the article is "The PlayStation 4 is already leading the virtual reality arms race, and here's why." So it's an opinion piece by Ben Kuchera, basically making the case for why Sony, with the PlayStation 4 and Project Morpheus, are poised to really take the lead in VR gaming. And he makes some very good points. And it'll be interesting to see if these things actually shake out as he's kind of talking about. But I would say you really need to read the article in order to get everything. But I think that the main points that he makes is that, number one, it's going to work on the hardware you already have. Whereas Steam VR, Valve's already said, yeah, this requires some beefy hardware. And the actual hardware itself, the headset you wear, the 2 base stations you have to have, the fact that you need a room to walk around in for the Vive to function properly, it's a bigger investment of hardware at the onset. And it's on top of that, you're probably going to need a really, really good video card. You're probably going to need to upgrade your video card if you're not already in like the top 3% of, fucking video card horsepower. So it's going to work on your existing hardware. You plug this thing into the PS4, it works. If you've got the PlayStation camera, you're already halfway there. But then the other part of it is the control scheme. Now there are controls. There are these 2 handheld controllers that we've seen for the Steam VR. I don't know that Oculus has shown off any actual hardware solution for that yet, but Sony has had the PlayStation Move controller for a while now, and so they've got a solution they can use in VR to allow for interaction. So they've already got the control system figured out. And then the other thing is the content. Sony has got in-house developers. Sony has got a great relationship with indie developers. They've been going out of their way since the launch or the announcement of the PlayStation 4 to court indie devs. Sony has got a content curation policy that makes it really easy for people to get content on the PlayStation 4. So they've kind of got the trifecta. They've got the hardware, they've got the control input, they've got the content. So all you've got to bring to the party is however much money they want for the actual headset, and you're good to go. Those are essentially the points being made, and there's obviously some details within there that we'll get into. But Tony, on face value, what we're sitting here talking about, do you think that Kuchera is right? Do you think that Sony is already leading the pack before the race has really even started?
I think, taking on face value, I do think that that's probably accurate. Although I would say that we're still so sort of early in this. I do still think that it's anybody's game. Yeah. I really feel like that there's. I don't think that Project Morpheus is necessarily. I don't think any things that we've talked about that you just mentioned, which I do think are valid points, and I do think that will give them a head start once they roll out. But I also think that I think that VR is going to be a huge game changer. It's just going to be a huge change for the way that we do so many more things beyond games. And so because of that, I kind of do wonder if a game focused one through Sony is necessarily going to just by de facto, because of these other factors, become the one that wins out, if you will. I do think one of the biggest things, and you did touch it a little bit, he touches on a little bit more in the article, is, well, and he doesn't even, I don't think say this specifically, but it is the thing that I sort of think is that sort of that closed system in a way.
A targeted platform.
Exactly. That was something you and I have always talked about. One reason that we do like Apple products a lot is because I do think that there is value in the company that makes the software and makes the hardware.
Makes the software specifically to work in conjunction with some specific hardware, or
and limits it. It says like it's not going to work with this anymore, and it's not going. Instead of trying to be this all, like it works with.
There is an advantage to that.
There is an advantage to that,
as we've seen in console gaming, many
and I think that is their biggest. I think that's the single biggest thing Sony has going for them is that factor. Yeah. I think the control piece of that, it's interesting to me because I think Move is before this is a huge flop. Is considered a huge flop for Sony. It did not do well. It did not. Now if it just sort of becomes that this is a great interface, which for everybody that's used it, it has said this is easily the most this is the most workable. It performs the best of pretty much all the interfaces people have tried with VR is so far. I do sort of think though that it's just it's a matter of time. Everybody has similar ways of doing these sorts of controls, granted between with the camera, with the way it works with it. Sony kind of claims that they have the best solution when it comes to this. I think though, again, given a little bit of time, once they've frankly cracked what I think they see as the hardest thing, which is the headset itself, it is kind of funny that in a way that they don't look at it as an entire sort of interface, or like that they sort of, the headset's got to be nailed down first. We'll figure out the rest later. Is the way sort of a lot of these companies almost sort of seem to be attacking it. Sony kind of, I think, has got definitely a leg up there.
Controls. They're like, oh, we could
we can adapt them. Hey,
maybe the thing that the PlayStation Move won't suck at is VR. Well, and that's not to say that it just didn't really have it never really had an application that people seem to want it for.
Exactly. They didn't have let's be brutally honest, they didn't have the Wii Sports. Yeah. They had and they did have a Wii Sports, let's be honest. But it wasn't it didn't come at a time where people really wanted it. It just didn't quite work out. And also I'm sure they have warehouses full of them. So now they can just ship them out to work with these once the headsets are ready. I do think that there is a lot to be said for that. I also sort of think one of the arguments he makes, again, I don't necessarily know is something you can say is in Sony's favor, is the indie push. The fact that they have this great working relationship with indie developers. Because let's be honest, I think if you look at the PC side of things, like through something like Steam, I would say theirs is as good, if not significantly better. Sony definitely has, I think, the best one as far as consoles go, but Microsoft has been making real inroads with the indie developers. Nintendo has actually been making pretty big inroads to indie development on its platform. Yep. So I don't know. Some of the arguments I think are right now, today, put a pin in it. Yeah, Sony is a little ahead of the game. You put all of those things together. Yeah, they're probably a little further ahead than some other people. I don't think, though, that this puts them significantly ahead. I guess that's where I'm coming down on it. I think they're in a good position. I think they're in probably as good a position as anybody. The one last thing that I didn't touch on, and it's the last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up about this, is I do think this is going to be a good thing for them early on, and I think a potentially bad thing for them down the road. And that is, you don't have to, it's sort of like locked hardware. Right. You buy a PS4, if you've already got your PS4, you've got Morpheus. It's a consistent experience across all their things. That is great, from the start, because hey, they're developing for it. They know the platform. They know exactly what they can do.
The longer that hardware goes on, you reach and the hardware's already past which you can't really draw a lot of more horsepower out of it, and then.
Well, and we're talking about this is going to be released a couple of years into the cycle already. Yeah. If this was coming out at the launch of the hardware, you almost could say that's, but we're already going to have lost like 2 years on hardware performance increase. I mean, that's one thing the Steam machines that we just talked about a minute ago have is they're going to be starting from a higher point just to begin with. Now, it does sound like, they are going to need that power to sort of get through, but it's one of those things. Like, I feel like
there's a trade-off. Some
of these other options are going to have that benefit down the road of, well, yeah, maybe it is a little harder to develop for our platform because we have so many different things they could work with. But the benefit of that is just like the benefit of PC gaming and everything else is you can have a better experience. That game that you want to play that is a multi-platform game is going to look better on our platform if you have the hardware than it will on this one over there. So yeah, I don't know.
That aspect of the console business has always been there. There's always been that aspect of gaming consoles have that advantage of locked hardware, of a targeted platform, and that does them a lot of good, through this, this kind of this sort of curve on the graph. And then as that begins to taper up, like once you kind of reach like that optimum sort of level of developer experience with the hardware, and people really do kind of get to the point where they're doing the best stuff graphically that can be done on the platform, and then it basically stagnates at that point. It goes flat. And then, the PC is, ever evolving, can kind of rise above that until the next generation. So I guess that my feeling on that is, yes, you're absolutely right about that, but that is just console gaming in general. And it's not, it's probably not going to be,
but I mean, that's what I'm saying though.
The VR thing.
So does that make it a strength then for the P? I mean, I guess that's where I'm coming down on. Is like I don't know that makes it a strength for PlayStation in this market. I just think that it makes it.
It just means that VR has the same.
It's good and bad.
Yeah,
for it.
It just means that VR has the same split between, like, what's the difference between console gaming and PC gaming? It just means that it's the exact same thing. What's the difference between console VR and PC VR? It just means that there's not going to be, like a unified experience just because it's VR. It's still it's still going to be dictated by the capabilities of the platform. But that's a good point. The thing that I'll say about this, I think that looking at it overall, I think where Sony is probably the strongest is Sony has the fewest pieces. They have the fewest balls still in the air. Sony has the most components of sort of like the VR ecosystem already in place or close to being locked down. They've definitely got content. They've got things they're working on in-house, and they've got people that they can reach out to very, very easily and say, hey, we want some VR on our platform. I did not get the chance to talk to them before the show, but I really wanted to reach out to James Burton from White Paper. Ether 1, my game of the year from last year, big hit on PC, coming to PlayStation 4, going to be on disc on PlayStation 4. Ether 1 featured Oculus Rift support when it came out on PC. To me, there's a perfect candidate, for Sony to like reach out to White Paper and say, "Hey, we know you did some VR stuff in Ether 1. We'd like to have VR support for Project Morpheus on the PlayStation 4 version of Ether 1. Can you make that happen?" I
think you might have made my point though. It was already on Oculus Rift. I mean, is that a strength for Sony though?
But I'm saying though, it's not just that. It's that plus the fact that they've got the input paradigm, which they've been refining, for several years now. They've got the content delivery system. They've got the targeted platform. There are the fewest question marks as far as not just like VR being a headset, but VR being a platform, VR being a business model. There are the least question marks with Sony's camp than anybody else right now. So I do think that probably gives them an early advantage, but it'll ultimately kind of come down to what everybody else puts in place and how quickly they get it there.
I guess what I'm saying is I think that Sony's in a position to get a head start. That doesn't necessarily mean they win the race, but I do think that they're going to have the capability to leap out in front early based on all this groundwork that's already been laid. But now the fundamental thing for me that kind of goes back to what you were saying just a second ago, kind of talking about, the difference between, console VR and PC VR. The thing for me about that is, will that ultimately matter? Or is it just going to be, I guess what I'm kind of feeling, I'm literally thinking about this as I'm saying it. So I might get to the end of it and disagree with myself. But what I am thinking right now is that really VR does not change anything in terms of the fundamentals of console gaming or PC gaming or those things as a business venture. And what I mean by that specifically is console gaming, or console VR, excuse me, is not likely to be as high fidelity a VR experience as you can get on PC, but it will probably cost you less money, and it will probably see more mainstream success because it will be easier to work out. It's easier to put a PlayStation camera under your TV or on top of your TV than it is to, dedicate an entire room of your house to the Steam VR kit with, the 2 base stations and all the stuff that you got to do. You're going to get a better experience out of that, but you're probably going to spend more money doing it and take more trouble doing it. And so in that way, it's just PC gaming in general. It costs a little bit more. It requires more effort, more knowledge, but theoretically you can get a better experience. But for people on the console side, they're like, you know what? My time and money is worth more to me than that. I'd rather just buy a box, plug it in, and have it work. You know?
It is sort of interesting that because I think that's a good point, although it sort of feels like a lot of these are the standard PC versus console arguments. Like,
they absolutely are.
If you want a better experience, you can have a better experience, but it might be more expensive and you might have more difficulty, implementing it or whatever. There's so many things here. I guess the thing with the article that I felt like a lot of the points that were sort of, and by no means I had a problem with the article. I actually think it was really good points. It really actually made me think about a lot of this more than I have in a while. Because I got to be honest, the VR thing is sort of, because I haven't had a chance to experience it. I'm sure if I, if I had, I might feel stronger about it. But I still sort of feel like it's far enough away out for me to where I think it's something I really want to experience in any meaningful amounts that I'm not that vested in it just yet. Right. But I do think that a lot of the points that were given to Sony, I think you could just as easily give to someone else. I still go back to you kind of talked about, like, you come up with an idea and they have partners they can go to work with. Steam has the same thing, and
absolutely. Valve's got their own internal development. Valve's got great relationships with developers and indie devs. So I agree with that point. I think that Valve definitely, in terms of content, Valve definitely has access to content in probably the same way Sony does.
Do we even have an idea? Do we even have a window of when Morpheus is coming out? Have they said the date or anything yet, or time frame?
First half of 2016 is what they're saying. But on the flip side of that, Valve's saying, like, consumer release this holiday season, and I'm like, that's really fast. If you guys actually make that date, I'll be impressed.
Yeah, although to me though, it's sort of where Sony, I think, will release with maybe a more full-featured overall package. Yes. I feel like the things that we're going to see from these other guys are going to be a little more work in progress. Not necessarily saying that, like, they won't offer some great experiences, but I don't know that we're going to get that turnkey sort of solution that I think Sony is going to offer. And that's maybe one thing I can say, that if Sony does offer this and it is turnkey, you buy the piece of equipment, plug it in, it just works. It's a good experience. Maybe not quite as good as the other guy out there in some ways, but it's a better experience. It works the way it's supposed to. It's easier to set up, whatever. If that happens, that could be enough to make people go to it, even if the other option is, from technical aspects, could potentially be a little bit better. I just think we're so early in this game. Yeah, I think it could go kind of to anybody.
So we've had our say on it. We want to turn it over to you guys now and obviously invite you to comment and share your thoughts on this, whether you think Kachair's got a point, whether you think Sony has an edge, or if the field is still wide open. We'll look forward to reading all of that stuff that you guys have to say over on OutlawGamers.com. All right, guys, we're going to hit the road and get our hands on some games this week. It's actually a pretty short list for me this week on account of the fact that my wife had a very serious case of food poisoning. She was laid up for 3 days straight, and basically I spent all that time looking after my daughter and calling Tony and asking him to run to the store and buy me groceries. Because he's like, hey, you need help? I'm like, yeah, man, you could go get me some eggs.
What about that smack you asked me to get?
That's right. Well, yes, on the DL.
Oh,
the point is that I did not actually get to. I really did not get a lot of gaming in this week because I was busy. I was busy playing a full-time parent. So anyway, I did.
But you
play
always,
Star Wars
at least
Commander.
you always win at that game.
Yes, I do. Well, I mean, until she grows up and robs a liquor store, then I win.
Well, there is that.
I played Star Wars Commander, and I really was making an effort to play Star Wars Commander because they were running a single player tournament this time. This is, the game has obviously got, I think most people focus on the multiplayer, but it does have it's got a single player campaign, and every now and then they'll release new chapters, in the campaign, you kind of like a new story arc and all that kind of stuff. But occasionally they'll do these campaigns where it's just essentially a single player arc, bunch of battles and things that you do, but you get campaign rewards as opposed to just earning ore and currency. You can get these campaign rewards, which is certain vehicles you can earn upgrades on, or certain vehicles you can only get through the campaign and all that stuff. And so I was really, really beating it. I was really, really working hard at trying to do the campaign. Anyway, the point is, I really was exerting effort to try to get this campaign because I got one of these campaign specific vehicles that I really would like to upgrade, and the only way I can do that is to get 7,000 campaign points, which I've not been able to do in the last multiplayer campaign because I'm woefully underpowered at the moment. But I thought, I'll be able to do it in the single player campaign. Not so much. I needed 7,000. I think I got 6,782, and I just capped out. Like I reached the limit of what my forces mathematically can do in terms of damage against the opposing force, and I just wasn't able to break through the wall. And the thing about it is, I kind of fucked myself in a way because in the game, if you upgrade your base, let's say all your stuff's at level 3. If you want to upgrade to level 4, you have to upgrade your base to level 4, okay? And then that unlocks the ability to unlock or to upgrade all your turrets to level 4, or your barracks, where your troops are going to be generated, that kind of thing. But the point is that I upgraded my base to level 8 way back when, and
I thought all your base belonged to us.
Yeah, well, but it's a level 8 base belong to us, is what I'm saying. But I upgraded my base to level 8, and I didn't immediately kind of focus on upgrading anything else to level 8, and that is where I really fucked myself, because as it turns out, like once you upgrade your base to level 8, at that point you're a level 8 player, which means you're getting attacked by level 8 players, and you're being asked to attack. Like they won't let you attack level 7 people. You got to go after level 8 people. And so if you're not upgrading everything at the same time, if you're not really making an effort to get everything upgraded to level 8, you'll find yourself being a little bit underpowered, which is where I am right now. That would not have helped me in the single player campaign, but it's just something like that continues to kind of plague me. The whole misstep on my part of upgrading just my base to level 8. So if you're playing this game,
that can be a pretty big problem though too, because sometimes that's a huge thing to overcome, because you just keep losing because you're fighting somebody that's just a little higher than you probably should be fighting. And it
takes a toll.
That's tough.
So anyway, I had a terrible experience with Star Wars Commander this week, and I hate myself, but I'm probably going to keep playing the game because I like it.
Well, that's a rousing endorsement.
That's right. What about you?
I will have to try that tonight. No, it does sound cool. You've shown me a little bit of the game. Actually, it looks pretty fun. I'm not a big because it's kind of resource management type stuff,
it's
right?
Clash of Clans. It's fucking Clash of Clans.
Yeah.
Or whatever that. What's the new one that they got? That Sports Illustrated.
Big Boobs.
What's her name?
To advertise.
Kate Upton. That Game of War. Like every time I see commercials for that, I'm just like, I haven't really seen any gameplay from this yet. Like all I see is Kate Upton
sitting topless in a tub. Yeah. Every time I see an ad for it,
I don't care about gameplay. Here's tits. Fuck you. Play the game. I mean, that's kind of how it feels to me.
It really is. All right. Well, so
What about you?
Don't game anywhere near as much as I've used to. I'm in the middle of moving right now, so had a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
I will say though, have had one game that's come out recently that I've been able to put a little bit of time in, and it's it's a reasonably simple game, but it's a lot of fun. It's actually the only Kickstarter that I've ever supported. I'm not a big Kickstarter fan in general.
So I hear.
But it's the rumor. But there was one started for the game Pro Pinball Time Shock, which is kind of an old PC pinball simulation game. And the reason I always liked this game is because it's based off of like emulating a real table-ish, not like a real table that exists in real life, but it's kind of like it goes based off of real physics as opposed to like the ball zooming over and flying laser beams and stuff on screen, like some of like the Zen Pinball and stuff like that, which are fun games, don't get me wrong, but this one actually feels like it could exist in real life. It has a really cool theme. Anyway, fun game. They're updating it. The Kickstarter was done by the original team that did the first game, basically just rendering it at higher resolutions with better models and stuff like that to make it just look great. Android, I think, is the next platform they're aiming to have it released on, and then PC, Mac, and some other stuff. So anyway, lots of fun. If you're into pinball games and you haven't already played it, it's definitely worth a try.
Yeah, I got the like whatever, like the freebie, that one table.
Whatever. Yeah,
I got the free version on iPad, and man, it's phenomenal. I mean, it's really, really cool.
Absolutely.
But anyway, the point is that we're out of here, folks. It's been a long show and a very fun show. Thank you very much, Tony, for filling in for Lauren this week on behalf of myself and L-Bomb. That's one of us. Anyway, the point is that if you have anything that you want to sound off on in this episode, if you want to talk about what you're playing, whether or not that's Star Wars Commander or Time Shock on iOS or something else, please feel free to leave us some feedback on that if you got a game you want to recommend. Of course, we want to hear your thoughts on the Clubhouse topic about whether or not the PlayStation 4 is poised to win the VR arms race, according to Ben Kachera. And then all of the GDC news that we talked about at the top of the show in the garage, Unreal Engine 4 going free, Source 2 also going free, and then the Valve hardware announcement, Steam Link, the controller, Steam Machine. All of that and more. We'd love to hear what you think. Sound off over at outlawgamers.com. We're going to be back next week, hopefully with Lauren, assuming his internet service is installed. But, of course, we'll have Tony on another time. Thank you again, Tony.
All right.
We'll see you guys next week. Until then, remember, you don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing.